Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Who dares awaken me from my slumber? Dennis Carroll. It is always excellent to see an ally of Jessica Jones venture into the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yet please, I am feeling very weak and need to feed. Absolutely delicious. Much better. And now that Dennis has released my shackles and I am revamped and fully charged, it is time for the Midnight Society to take a walk into the darkness. My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. We have a friend of Jessica Jones, also a member of the Midnight Society, Dennis Carroll, stopping into the Fox Den tonight to hang out with us, and he is extremely busy. So let's sit back, open our minds, and try to indulge some really quality information that's going to be shared with us. Dennis, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing good. On the state drive.
Yes, excellent, my friend. I definitely know you are down in the area that's about ready to get slapped around a little bit, unfortunately, by a storm. So this is good that you are staying dry. What else you been up to? Would you like to tell the audience what you do inside or outside of cryptids or outside of Midnight Lycanthropy?
Yes, and I'm always basically busy in research. That includes field research and investigative research. It's always an ongoing thing. I've been involved in this field for well over half a century, and it never gets old. I'm always learning something. I'm always investigating. I do a lot of consulting. I have a lot of people who consult me with things. So I do that, a lot of that on the phone or sometimes in person, depending on the situation.
That's excellent. Heck yeah, my friend. Sounds like you stay pretty busy for sure. I feel that lately. Well, I shouldn't say lately, for the past almost year, all I do is edit, continue, and keep on, working on like my book and such. So I definitely understand how that all rolls. Well, to my audience that does not know Dennis, we are going to have links in the description for you to check out his own thread and what he does. And also, he is a consistent host with Jessica Jones, which everyone here is well aware of who the Cryptid Huntress is. She comes on bi weekly and even weekly sometimes. So, tonight, Dennis, I would like to just throw you the mic, my friend. And if you would like to potentially talk about your thoughts on Dogman or what they could be, or pretty much anything that you would like to address within the Dogman topic. Let's do this.
Well, for me, Dogman has always been a very interesting enigma. There are so many stories about him, along with Bigfoot and other cryptids like that I've investigated over the years. I've never actually had a actual encounter I don't think, with Dogman. I had an encounter once with something I call a cryptid X, and it might have been Dogman. I can't say for sure. I have actually seen Bigfoot. I made face-to-face eye contact with him. I know he exists and that he's out there. And one thing that struck me after I had my incident with Bigfoot, one thing that, and this will do this to you, one question that came to haunt me, and that was, if this is real, and I know it is because I saw it with my own eyes, what else could be out there? You know, and that is kind of what lit a fire under me to find out more of what could possibly be in existence out there. But the incident I had with the possible Dogman was very interesting situation.
That is some great stuff right there, and terrifying as well, because I always try to be calculated, I guess, with the types of words I use to describe an encounter, because as a journalist, when I hear something, I am excited to learn, pick up potentially new descriptions as what's occurring, and send it to my science team. So it's cool to me, but the term cool to somebody that's having the encounter might not be the proper terminology, because to them it could have been quote unquote traumatizing, etc. And just in general, learning about all this is something that, it's why I can't delve into anything else. It's not that I don't find so much in life in general exciting and interesting. I love to learn, but as stated, I mean, I have 548 pages of just encounters ranging all the way back from 290 BC up to a few days ago. And until I'm able to figure out why people are missing near cave systems in national forest, why we have these strange footprints that are unverifiable, why we have these vocalizations that can't be verified, until I'm able to get a little bit more closure on that, I just can't dive into anything else, because I don't feel like I'd be doing my job properly as a journalist because of everything that is occurring.
That's the way you have to look at it, especially as an author, and I've written several books. You have to assimilate your information correctly, range it uh, the way you need to form the book itself. It's an ongoing process when you assimilate information like that. But when you have your own experiences, and you put them down as that, it's a different thing altogether, really, than somebody else's. You know what I'm saying? Because you lived it and you experienced it. You know how it felt.
Exactly, 100% right there. Well spoken. And my audience knows this, and pretty much everybody that hangs out with me should. I've never had any sort of paranormal encounters, never seen a UFO, never seen Dogman, Sasquatch, any of that stuff. I've literally just had two, maybe three encounters with deranged individuals that I guess could have really put me in a bad spot, but luckily I was able to avoid that. So that's pretty much the most danger or cryptid type encounter I've ever had is with human beings. It is just interesting at first, when I started covering the topic, 50-50. Wasn't really sure how to approach this in regards of where I was standing, because again, as a journalist, it's not my job to speak my opinion unless I am asked. It's my job to gather data and sure, create a hypothesis and theory and such. But at the end of the day, the job of a journalist is to take what's presented and outweigh, okay, it sits on this side or it sits over here. It's not to speak your own opinion unless somebody wants it. So I've always tried to, like I said, just be extremely subjective, objective, and, just be optimistic, but also realize, unfortunately, human beings like to lie, prefabricate, things like that. So I just always go into things full heartedly, making sure that I do research before I take people's words. And that's why I have a science team. We have an individual that deals with mental health, all kinds of things. So that way we can try to have these people screened as much as possible before we really give them any sort of platform to speak with what we're doing here at the North American Dogman Project. I mean, that's something we're huge on. You can only verify or debunk something so much, but if it sits like a 50-50, then, it sits in limbo. And that's where a lot of things are going to sit, because personally, I feel like a lot of the things that I hear about now, it's, yeah, sure, they're different type of encounters, but it's the same type of information that's already been out there. I feel like the things where I've gained the most with my science team and such is looking at historical aspects and living and breathing animals that fit into the category of a lot of sightings, and also ancient animals.
And the interesting thing about Dogman, and I've talked about this before just recently, I have to wonder sometimes how many, having known about werewolves, how many times there may be a misconception on some people's part. They may think they're seeing a Dogman, but they're actually seeing a werewolf. I do know that werewolves exist without a doubt because they are products of black magic, dark black magic. They're not. We've been misled by Hollywood when it comes to werewolves because they've made their own little legend and patina of folklore around them. That's not really true. The true folklore, and I'm big on folklore. The true folklore is completely different than what Hollywood has made for us. The werewolf can become a wolf. This man or woman can turn into a wolf by supernatural means, very much like the skinwalkers that we've heard so much about. And they do this with black magic, the dark arts, and they have what's called a werewolf pelt or belt that they can put on and become this. They can do this at any time, day or night. Doesn't matter what phase of the moon it is or whatever. That's Hollywood about the full moon thing. But I have to wonder how many times when these encounters happen, is people are not actually seeing perhaps a werewolf instead of a dogman. But there are some big differences between dogman and a werewolf.
That is great stuff right there again, and I like how your mind rolls for sure. I've seen you definitely on Jessica's show a few times because I try to always tune in and support her as much as possible. And yes, that actually leads me into a question I'd like to ask you, my friend. So our science team is almost on the verge of bringing this into a theory that just like every other great civilization, the cynocephalized civilization fell. No different than Egypt, Rome, Greece, the Aztecs, Mayans, some of the ancient Chinese cultures, whatever, you name it. Unfortunately, everything great falls at a point in time. So we seem to think that they are now obviously in sparse numbers because they were once a massive civilization that, is no longer prevalent like that. They're in smaller numbers. But when we do our research on that, they did wear human clothing. They also wore fur. So that actually is some of the things I try to talk about sometimes, thinking that potentially when somebody might say, hey, they saw the Rougarou or the full moon and this animal had clothes on, well, also any predatory animal or animals in general are nocturnal. But when someone saw this, was it because of the full moon or was it just because dogmen chill outside at night? And also, like I said, cynocephali wore clothing as well. It makes me think potentially when people automatically saw them with clothing on, they had to have assumed it was a human at a point in time. But it isn't though, because we have documents in history showing them wearing, like I said, human clothing, furs, armor, etc.
Oh yes, there have been many reports of dogman even having war paint on
Mm-hmm.
and feathers. Yeah, and also there are reports of them wearing furs or cloth, lion cloths like the Native Americans used to wear.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would think if they had lived in that environment or lived very close to the Native Americans, they may have assimilated some of their culture. They may have watched these people and said, "Hey, we can do that," kind of thing. I think that might be part of what involves in that.
Again, beautifully spoken. I love that because, like you said, yes, I'm a firm believer there's massive differences, and I do try to stress that with individuals. I mean, I focus on the dog man, but sometimes some of the cases can be, potentially mixed up. Was it a skinwalker? Was it a werewolf? There's a little bit of, loose ends right there, which is why I have people around me that specialize in those topics that can actually bring more clarity to it because I spend all my energy for the most part trying to figure out the dogman aspects of it. And yes, dogmen don't go back and forth from human beings, at least in all of our research. And they can also be disposed of by normal weaponry. There was actually a really old case of a farmer. I'm not sure if he had a spear or just a really strong stick that was pointed as this dogman or dog canine creature, whatever people would like to call it, came charging at him. Its own weight impaled itself, or he had the spear to impale it, but he disposed of it with just a stick or spear. And there's also other accounts from like Herodotus and Jason and the Argonauts, same thing. Sure, the Cynocephali were crazy, badass warriors, but they still could lose and get smoked by cold steel. So that again
is very interesting to me because it's like with grizzly bears and such. There's cases of people using pretty heavy ammunition, but not hitting it in direct spots where you're like, holy crap, this bear is like immortal. But then there's other times where somebody has a pretty low caliber weapon, but they just hit it in that sweet spot and drop it, you know? And again, that would kind of solidify to me that if someone was able to dispose of this thing with swords like Herodotus and Alexander the Great are saying, and then this farmer reports he impaled it, and other people have reported hitting it with cars and unaliving it, how immortal could this thing really be? It sounds like you and I that it could still be wounded and disposed of.
Well, as a doctor of metaphysics, I have studied a lot on the unseen aspects of this universe and how it relates to the seen things, the things that we know, the normal things in our life. Here's the interesting thing about that to me. There may be some type of a transmutation type thing being involved in this. There may be some portal activity. There may be some interdimensional transference going on with some of this stuff. That might explain why some people shoot Dogman and it doesn't do anything to it. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
bother phase him a bit. And then others can shoot at him and it has an effect on him. I have to wonder if sometimes they're catching him in the right phase when he's completely physical or he's in more of a spiritual mode or something like similar to that. I have to wonder about that because there are a lot of instances where he has been shot point blank without any effect upon him at all.
So true, my friend. And I know here at the North American Dogman Project, Jody breaks it down into three sections: paranormal, potentially, extraterrestrial, potentially, and physical, potentially. And like you said, yeah, there's a ton of cases that we've had where people say that they shined a flashlight on it and it almost looked like smoke, kind of. And like you said, there's other cases where one person on Skinwalker Ranch said that they saw this thing wearing a trench coat, like smoking a cigarette, basically. What? And then another time that they shot at it and blew a huge chunk of its rib off and it didn't like react. But then there's other times, like you just stated, where like the case from Kingston, New York, where the dude blew off half of the thing's chest and it's screaming and sputtering and coughing up blood everywhere. So it is so interesting. It makes me wonder if, as you said, could it be a point in time where they fully taken on that form, or is it maybe still all separate? Meaning, for example, like some of the manifestations, I don't know the most about paranormal and dark arts, etc., but I would assume, say, if demons and things or dark entities would have to have some sort of intelligence and they know, what are we scared of in Hollywood? Vampires and werewolves and all that such. So it makes me wonder potentially if that entity would also just take on that form, knowing it would just drive somebody into absolute terror.
The interesting thing about that to me, and as a member, I'm also a member of the North American Dogman Project. The interesting thing to me about a lot of this stuff is it may have spiritual aspects to it. As a demonologist, which I've been involved in demonology for a long, long time, I know that there are spiritual aspects to a lot of different things. And you have to wonder sometimes when you run into these circumstances if you're dealing with something that's transmutating, as I call it, from one reality to another reality. Uh, it may be going from the spiritual reality to the physical reality. I've seen the demonic. So if they can do that, certainly other corporal type beings, such as a werewolf, which is really a supernatural creature, by the way, and all dogmen may have that ability, along with Bigfoot too, as well. The Bigfoot that I sighted that night walked behind a rather large oak tree and was just gone. And there was no way possibly on this planet that thing could have gotten away from me that quickly. It was just gone. It stepped behind the tree and wasn't there anymore. That makes me wonder what we're truly dealing with here.
Yes, that is straight up terrifying right there. And that actually leads me into two questions for you. And I would like to, I guess, potentially see where you stand on this. Do you, number one, feel like Sasquatch is potentially just as involved as, say, the Dogman with some of the missing people? And the reason I ask that is I've read really messed up lores and legends, especially from like the Choctaw, about that battle that they had with these Sasquatch that stole basically people from their village. And I mean, throughout historical aspects, not every Native American culture does speak the most highly about Sasquatch,
But also on the other spectrum, it does not seem like any of the Native American cultures really speak too highly of the Dogman. It seems like they're definitely ones that they always say to be wary of. And that even kind of goes back into the cynocephaly time. They did seem to be something that you needed to respect and that you never really fully knew where they were aligned.
I think, without a doubt, that they knew, the Native Americans knew definitely, that Sasquatch had a tendency to kidnap people, I think especially women,
Mm-hmm.
whatever purposes, procreation or whatever. I think that went on a lot. That they were very concerned about that. They would not even let their own women go out, even in daytime, alone in the woods. Of course, this might have had something to do with other tribes as well, but still, they talked about this. And that was one of the cautions that they gave their children and their women. As for Dogman, I can't really see him kidnapping people like Sasquatch possibly would. He may be unaliving some people. I don't know. That is a possibility. But I think the Native Americans looked more at Dogman like a more mommy type entity to them. He was a bad medicine type thing for them. They didn't like
Ah,
him. Very much like the Skinwalker in that respect.
and that would all make a ton of sense right there. And that's just something, like I said, I've just been thinking about a lot too, because obviously growing up, Sasquatch was one of the more prevalent things until I was able to figure out about Linda Godfrey, rest in peace, and Jody Cook and the North American Dogman Project. And by the way, that's awesome. You're part of us. That's great because I was going to ask if you wanted to be. So this is beautiful. So once I figured out about all that stuff, I really started to, in my eyes, feel like Sasquatch was in good hands and it had pretty much been presented to people that could bring it to the next level. And now I feel like Dogman needs to be brought to that because I'm a big advocate saying personally, I believe there's just as much evidence for Dogman, if not more, than any other sort of paranormal or cryptid or UFO activity out there. I mean, 290 BC is, as far as I know there are historical references to Sasquatches, but I don't think like the Egyptians and the Greeks mention any of that stuff. But they literally mention like King Lycan and the cynocephaly. So that to me is just straight up almost ignorance on behalf of science and society just to overlook that because the evidence is just piling up so much. My table is about ready to break. And what I wanted to ask as well is what do you think would be the outcome of the Dogman versus a werewolf then? I mean, yeah, sure, that sounds like a Hollywood question, but legitimately, I mean, we were speaking about how some of the dogmen can take injuries. And I've also heard though, same thing with werewolves that, like you said, that you don't need silver and stuff to get to dispose of them. And that's more of a new age thing. But again, werewolves are cool, but that's definitely not my specialty.
Well, to me, the werewolf is a very interesting thing because it can be a man at one point, a white man or a woman, depending upon the circumstance. They can be a man or a woman at one point. It could be your next door neighbor or a nice girl at the checkout at the supermarket. You never know who it is. And yet, when they put that belt on, they do the dark magic. They become this beast. And the interesting thing about the werewolf, to me, and I've studied the werewolves a lot. You know, Ed and Lorraine Warren had a very famous werewolf case that they investigated. But I've studied the werewolf a lot, especially in folklore. And he is more or less an apex type, psychological or psychotic type, more so than the Dogman. Many reports I've heard about Dogman, it's sort of, well, let me put it this way. If you met a werewolf, that's probably going to be the end of you, okay? Because
Yes.
they're taking you to pieces. But a Dogman might cut your break and let you walk away. That's the big difference between a Dogman and a werewolf.
I love how you just said that as well because that's pretty much how I feel too. I feel like the dog man is kind of more captain of the cool kids. It's just going to handle and think more wisely. Like when people see it, and it's almost like it's evaluating the situation. Is it worth me to come try to take this person out, even though it looks like they got a couple dogs and a gun with them? Whereas a werewolf would just go psycho still. So that almost makes me think that sure you have all that raged out power and such, but you're not thinking as calculated. I would think that the dog man would be much more calculated, I guess, because again, it would just have way more cool demeanor about it.
I tell you, to me, the number one thing that sets these two things apart You got to remember this: the werewolf, no matter how big and enraged this beast is, no matter how much it is, uh, it still has the mind of a man, which is what makes it so incredibly dangerous. Okay. And now, if you look at the dog man, I think his mind is more like the mind of an animal, like a dog.
Ah,
In that respect, I think they're coming from two different directions here. That's what makes the distinction between them so different.
awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong here as well. Before, I would love you to actually maybe tap on that werewolf encounter you had said, because I know they were really big into paranormal stuff, but I didn't know they had actually ever covered a werewolf case. That'd be awesome to hear some of that. But werewolves don't have tails either, correct?
Correct. Well, there's several different types of werewolves. There's the werewolf that is brought about by dark magic, and it is usually a four-legged animal. It doesn't usually walk on hind legs. Well, it can do that, but it doesn't usually do it like the Dogman. Um, that's one aspect of the werewolf. Then you have sort of the werewolf curse, where you become more like a wolf man. There's more of man to you than wolf. There you would walk on two legs, like a man.
Mm.
Pretty much like Lon Chaney Jr., the wolf man kind of thing.
Yes.
That's the curse of the werewolf. So you're like partly hybrid, part wolf, part man. Um, That's the interesting part about all of this, is that the case that Ed and Lorraine Warren had as a demonologist, there are werewolf or wolf spirits that can possess people, demonic spirits that have the attributes of the wolf or an animalistic attribute about them. They can possess people and take them over and turn them into these animals, turn them into wolves and all that. And that's what happened with the Ed and Lorraine Warren case. They had a man who actually would turn into a wolf, but he wasn't a full-blown wolf. It wasn't a complete werewolf like I talked about earlier on four legs, like the Beast of Gravatin thing in France. But he would become very animalistic. He even, I think, tore a iron sail off of a door.
Jeez.
Pulled the door off of a sail during one episode. He would grow his hair. He would not be. It would not be a complete transformation, but it's very close to one. And I have actually seen. I've encountered that in certain exorcisms I've been a part of, where people's faces would change to a more animalistic look about them. It seemed like the teeth would grow longer, the nails longer. They became more like an animal. They would actually lose their humanity. That's the interesting thing about the werewolf legend. They say that the many times that you turn into a werewolf, every time you go back to a man, you lose a lot of your humanity. So eventually, if you do it too many times, stay a wolf. You're a wolf for good. That's it. So the interesting thing about all of this, when you deal with the demonical side of it, is that you are running a risk of losing your humanity. When you lose your humanity, I'm afraid you also lose your soul.
Yeah, that would all make a ton of sense right there for sure. And that also, yeah, makes me think of like Benicio del Toro and the Wolfman remade version. So pretty much like he has a lot of that look that you were speaking about as well. And yeah, that would all make a ton of sense. I know that from pretty much all the Dogman encounters we have, everyone has had a tail and they fall into a bunch of different variations, meaning some look like a bear dog, which, you know, we know in history that the Amphiceno Day and bear dogs did exist, which is ironic. And then, you know, hyenas, which hyenas do have tails but have no relation to canines at all. Baboon like ones, same thing. And German Shepherd like ones, yet they all have tails. And when it comes to the Michigan Dogman and such, well, I personally think that was quote unquote a dogman. But that leads me into my next question here. The Beast of Bray Road. Do you yourself feel that that is a dogman or maybe a werewolf? And the reason I ask is because I know at points in time there was rumored to be sinister cult like activity that was occurring near Bray Road in certain aspects. And from people and researchers that I spoke to out there,
the officials came in at a point in time and demolished the whole entire area. But previous to that, they ended up finding this section of woods where there was a ton of burrows, or it looked to be, or just holes in the ground with all these ripped apart animal body parts strewed everywhere, which doesn't have to be an animal behavior. But then there was also this tree that had all these skulls set up on it as well, which again, that doesn't have to be anything besides human behavior. But we have heard of some strange type of structures like that in maybe Dogman or werewolf type territory. So they went in and bulldozed all that, and they're still having the Beast of Bray Road sightings. I don't know if that was previous to when Linda Godfrey started covering it, meaning the occult activity was occurring then, or it happened afterwards, but I do know it occurred. So, how do you feel about that whole thing right there, the Beast of Bray Road?
Well, Linda Godfrey was a good friend of mine, and we used to talk a lot about that. And she was also, in some ways, undecided about the Beast of Bray Road being exactly what it truly was. There were some aspects of it that kind of leaned toward the werewolf, and there were other aspects that leaned toward more like a dogman type thing. It's kind of hard to assimilate because they're so similar in some things. You have to be very careful how you weigh your evidence and stuff like that. Well, my good friend Ken Gerhardt, he actually investigated the Beast of Providence, France, and I think they determined that that thing might have possibly been a hyena. It might have been somebody's pet hyena that they set out. Whatever the situation, it's an interesting theory. But to me, when it comes down to these things, you got to remember this about the werewolves. They're brought about by black and dark magic. The higher up on the rung of the black magic ladder you go, the more shape shifting ability you are given. You can take the form of a wolf. You can take the form of a dog. It can be a cat. It can be a big, large black feline cat. Type, I call them phantom cats, the big cats that people see. It could be something like that. You can take on the form of a tiger. The list goes on and on. What you suppose it can do with the shape-shifting ability? This is a big thing in dark witchcraft. It is a power sought after. It is one of the more supreme demonic powers. And that's what makes these things so dangerous and hard to find, and so damn blasted hard to pin down. Because, like I said, they can be anyone, and they can look like almost anything they want to. You know, if you study a lot of this stuff, you go back in history about Sinus and Thalia and all that stuff that went on. The Greeks talked about it, the Egyptians talked about it, the people of India talked about it. This is a worldwide thing, that there once was a race of beings that had dog-like heads about them. And I have to wonder if maybe Dogman that we know about is maybe the remnant of some of these beings, of this race that might have once been on this planet. Very much like the giants and the Nephilim and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but that's an interesting aspect of it too, because a lot of this stuff is what I call unnatural nature. It's not supposed to exist in nature. For some reason it does. And we need to try to understand why that is happening. Why is that? What's the cause for that? What its real origin is.
And that is all, again, excellent stuff right there. And that's kind of where I feel with the Beast of Bray Road too, is that it's most likely a combination of potentially both, like you said, potential Dogman stuff and maybe some darker things going on. And yeah, thanks so much for popping in tonight and hanging out with all of us, my friend. You are a wealth of knowledge, and it was really excellent to be able to sit down and pick your mind and learn a lot, because I'm a huge nerd and geeker, man. I love to learn. My mind's like a sponge, and anything that makes me intelligent in a way, I love to learn. Anything else goes in one ear out the other if it's not helping me become better at just learning and my brain power. So I appreciate it. You did some amazing things, meaning you just blew up some information that I'd never really even heard of or had a chance really to put my mind to, man. So I look forward to definitely getting you back on at some point and collaborating again here soon, man. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'll definitely come back if you want to. We'll continue some more discussions on this. I'll leave you with my favorite quote tonight. That's this. It was said by Herbert Spencer said this, that every myth and legend known to mankind is not without its authentic foundation.
Thank you for everybody who stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will see you very soon.